Mis amigos, bienvenidos, soy Juani, Episodio 3. So welcome back guys, just a quick one. I had a really good question from someone who's really just struggling to kind of wrap their head around how the verbs work in Spanish, because they are quite different when we compare them to English. So I thought that'll be a good one to go down in this episode. So what we're going to do is different types of verbs in Spanish. So the ones we're going to cover today are AR verbs. So AR verbs, very simply, what they are verbs in Spanish that end in the letters A and R. So what we're going to do now is use a verb that I found was probably the most useful when I first started learning Spanish, which is one that we've kind of covered before, and it's the verb to speak. So the verb hablar. Hablar. So remember that tip I said to you in the first episode. In Spanish, the H has no sound, so you just ignore that it's there. So quickly, when we're referring to us or who we're speaking about, all we do is yo stands for I, tú stands for you, so tú is you, him or her is él or ella. Talking about us in a group of people, so we, for example, in English, would say nosotros, so nosotros, we, or if you're speaking about another group of people, it'll be ellos or ellas, so ellos or ellas, they or them, when we're translating it to English. All right, now, what we do with the Spanish verb. So let's first take out the A and the R off the end of the verb hablar. And what we do is we change the letters around, so depending on who we're speaking about. So if I'm speaking about myself, I'll put an O there. So yo hablo. Speaking about you, take the AR out, put an AS there, and it'll be tú hablas. Él or ella habla. So take out the AR and put just an A there. Talking about us, we, a group of people, it'll be hablamos, so nosotros hablamos. And finally, if you're speaking about another group of people, it'll be ellos or ellas hablan. So take out the AR and put an A in there instead. So these endings don't change. Okay, so these endings you use with all AR verbs. You do get irregular verbs that kind of slightly deviate from that pattern, but for the most part, we won't worry about that just yet. We'll just focus on the regular verbs here, and these are the endings that you simply use for those. Okay, so pretty simple. If I wanted to say I speak English, so if you remember from the first episode, English in Spanish is inglés. So inglés. So if I want to say I speak English, how would I say it? Yo hablo inglés. So yo hablo inglés. Now, cool thing with Spanish is you don't actually have to use yo hablo or tú hablas. Basically, because as you can see from those conjugations there, the endings, if I say hablo, everyone in Spanish already knows that I'm talking about myself. Or if I say hablas, everyone in Spanish already knows that I'm talking about you. Okay, so that's the cool thing about Spanish. A little bit different to English. In English, I can't just say speak English. I have to say I speak English, or you speak English, or they speak English. Okay, so English, you have to refer to who you're speaking about. In Spanish, it's different because all these conjugations are different depending on who you're speaking about. Now, brother in Spanish is hermano. Hermano. So mi hermano means my brother. So if I want to say my brother speaks French, okay, now French in Spanish, remember, is francés. So francés. So if I want to say my brother speaks French, what would you say? Mi hermano habla francés. All right, now let's change it up. Let's say you're talking about your parents. Now, your parents, or my parents in Spanish, is mis padres. Mis padres. So let's say you want to say my parents don't speak Spanish. What would you say? Mis padres no hablan español. So mis padres no hablan español. Okay, good. So you should be starting to get the hang of it there. Let's throw one more at you. Let's say you're talking about we as a group. So me and a couple of friends, for example, and I want to say we don't speak Spanish. So we don't speak Spanish this time. No hablamos español. So no hablamos español. Okay, cool. So you should be starting to get used to those endings. So just remember, when you're thinking, using an AR verb in Spanish, you can just think, okay, if I'm talking about myself, I put an O there, so I'd say hablo. If I'm talking about him, my brother, or someone else, I'll say habla instead. So that should be starting to sink in now. Now let me give you one more verb, okay, just so you kind of get the hang of it. Okay, another common verb in Spanish is estudia. Estudia, which you guessed it, means to study. Okay, so if I wanted to say I study Spanish, how would I say it? Estudio español. So estudio español. Sister in Spanish is mi hermana. So mi hermana. Mi hermana. So let's say you want to say my sister studies German. Now, German in Spanish is alemán. So, alemán. So let's say you want to say my sister studies German. What would you say? Mi hermana estudia alemán. So mi hermana estudia alemán. Okay, so just change that ending there. One more. Let's say your parents again. So let's say your parents are studying English. What would you say? Mis padres estudian inglés. So mis padres estudian inglés. So that's how you use the Spanish AR verbs. Have a look at some other Spanish verbs and just see if you can think to yourself. Okay, so if I'm speaking about myself, I change the ending to O. Or if I'm speaking about you, then I change the ending to AS instead. So have a play around with it and just see how you go with that. Okay, but apart from that, that's it from me. See you in the next episode. Hasta pronto.